What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Believe in Jets podcast. I am your host, DTereman, and today I am joined by a special guest in the bye week. He is the host of the Locked On Jets postcast, my dear friend, Christopher P. Schubert. So happy to have you on, Chris. How are you doing today?
Dylan, good to see you, my friend. Happy to see the success that you're having over on YouTube, the Believe in Jets stuff. It's good to see you. It's good to talk ball, and definitely a more positive outlook for this episode than when we first decided to get together and you DM'd me wanting to have me on, because the Jets were winless when we first started this conversation. So the Jets having a win certainly gives it a more positive feel for us to talk some ball. But good to be here, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we may have seen a more red-faced Dylan and Chris if we were 0-8 at the bye week. So I am so glad that we have a win under our belt. Today, we are going to talk about some breaking news, a trade that has happened. The trade deadline as we speak Wednesday afternoon is about 6 days away, and we have at least one trade to talk about. We will break down other potential trades as the Jets are perceived from the outside to be sellers at this deadline. And then at the back end of the podcast, we will talk about our back nine expectations, right? We'll kind of break this up into a golf course, and the Jets struggled through the front nine, but what can they do on the back nine to have a more modest scorecard when they get back to the clubhouse? So, first things first, the breaking news trade that happened just about 25 minutes ago. One of the names who was rumored to be traded, Michael Carter II, was in fact traded to the Philadelphia Eagles in a 2027 pick swap, but the Eagles also throw in wide receiver John Mechie III. So the total parameters of the trade are Michael Carter and a 2027 seventh-round pick sent to the Philadelphia Eagles for John Mechie III and a 2027 sixth-round pick. So they move up one round, 2 drafts from now. They ship off their veteran cornerback, who was at one point the highest paid cornerback, who was thriving in the former coaching staff under Robert Saleh, and they get a dart throw at wide receiver. So, Chris, what are your thoughts immediately hearing from this trade news?
Yeah, a lot of different layers to this one. I think the place that I would start is that this is the Jets signaling to everybody that they're open for business. It's one thing for all of us to talk about the Jets being sellers. And I think in the sport of football, everybody's put in one of these buckets of being a seller or a buyer. But most of the time, the trade deadline comes and goes, and you don't see a ton of activity. By the Jets making this move, one that I'm totally on board with and makes sense for a bunch of different reasons, you now are probably inviting a couple of more phone calls today for Will McDonald or for Quinnen Williams or for Breece Hall or for the litany of Jets that I'm sure we're going to talk about here that could see themselves on different teams by the time the trade deadline comes and goes. So that's takeaway number one. Takeaway number two is just further proof that this coaching staff, this regime didn't see a place for Michael Carter in the now and in the future. It was evident when they traded for Brownlee. It's even more evident now that they felt comfortable, sending him out for a pick swap and a lottery ticket, because that's what this is. And then I think my third takeaway would be, while I don't expect John Mechie to come in here and set the world on fire and be a, above average wide receiver too, which is what the Jets are sorely searching for after Garrett Wilson, I do appreciate the acknowledgement that they need help in that area and their willingness to use a player like Michael Carter and this time of year to say, you know what? We were going to cut Michael Carter at the end of the year and get absolutely nothing for him. So we do this pick swap and we also get a dart throw. And if the dart throw doesn't work out, this is probably where we were going to end up anyway with Michael Carter off the roster.
Yeah, and it seems like financially they were going to save money however they got rid of Michael Carter, but it seems like this way they saved the most amount of money. Plus, to add on top of it, a follow-up tweet from the trade that happened was that Michael Carter basically negated $5 million of his 2026 contract that was specifically there for injury. So he waived that in his contract to help facilitate the trade to the Eagles. So the Jets are going to get some financial compensation, and we can disagree maybe later on how they're going to use that compensation, but to get something out of Michael Carter after you've essentially already replaced him, and there were thoughts, myself included, perhaps you can move him back to safety now that Andre Sisco's hurt. It kind of opens up a path for his versatility. He can not only be the backup slot, but he could be a safety for you. Obviously, they had different plans. They choose to trade Michael Carter, but I like them doing it now as opposed to the offseason, like you said. And they get back a dart throw as a wide receiver, one game after not having Garrett Wilson, and you have Tyler Johnson, Isaiah Williams, Alan Lazard, Arian Smith out there running routes. And that's no real disrespect to those guys, but they saw what we saw on tape. And even though it was a very good offensive game, they definitely still need wide receiver help, especially wide receiver 2, now that Josh Reynolds is on the IR, expected to miss minimum of 14 games. So I like the move. I don't expect a ton from John Mechie. Would I be surprised if Michael Carter goes and thrives in a new system? No, not entirely, but he's also surrounded by a ton of talent on that Eagles defense as well. And as long as he can stay healthy, I think he should be relatively fine in Philadelphia. So you mentioned there is a litany of players on this list that we could be potentially parting ways with within the next couple of days. We're just going to kind of go in order. I have a list here. Jermaine Johnson, I just want to start off with this because they had a mutual agreement that he's probably not going to leave, right? He did the GIF, I'm not leaving, the Wolf of Wall Street one. And it seemed like when the reporters followed up with him and talked one-on-one, he had the sense that they sat down with coaching staff or front office and they each agreed, we're not going to trade you. I want to be here, Jermaine Johnson said. So I really like that from Jermaine. Were you thinking that he could have been traded before all that happened?
I certainly wasn't hoping that he was going to get traded before we got that reassurance, as much of a reassurance as it is. I put this trade deadline for the Jets into two distinct buckets. There is a bucket of players that are under team control beyond this year. And then there are the players that are either going to be roster casualties at the end of the year, one way or another, or the guys that are impending free agents, right? And I think you have to look at those two buckets differently in your appetite to move those players. And Jermaine Johnson is in the bucket of he is with the New York Jets under team control beyond this season. And I had a real tough time moving a player like that at that position who is under team control beyond this year. So good to see that that's not even a topic of conversation. Does feel like we are going to have a little bit of it with Will McDonald, but at least Jermaine Johnson isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, Will McDonald was the next player I wanted to talk about, sticking on the defensive line. A bit of a one-trick pony, some people will call him. He is not used on all three downs by this defensive staff. Obviously, Steve Wilks feels he's more of a pass rusher, more of a liability in the run game. And although I think he is a bit of a better run defender than given credit for, it's clear that they don't see eye to eye with that type of usage for him. So the potential compensation for Will McDonald is likely a third, but at very best, a second-round pick. And my ears shot up at a second-round pick looking at the San Francisco 49ers. Let's see if we can go put another, situational pass rusher behind Rob Saleh and his defense and see if he could thrive. Then they made a move for Keon White of the New England Patriots. So I'm not quite sure that they're still in the market for a pass rusher, especially trying to send over a second-round pick. I'm not doing it for a third-round pick. I'm only entertaining a second-round pick because you're still talking probably about a pick 50 to 65. Like, you're talking about the back end of the second round, a team that has playoff aspirations. So I don't necessarily love the usage for Will McDonald currently, but I can't say that I want him to move because I can totally see him getting 2.5 sacks on a playoff contending team that's up 8+ points in the second half of their game in late January.
Yeah, and this goes to the philosophical issue I have right now with the New York Jets. And it's you have a team right now that the win helped this in many regards, but a lot of us were questioning if Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji could be one and done. Could they completely hit the reset button again at the end of this season? And while, yes, winning that game against Cincinnati, I think, is going to give them some breathing room, there is still 9 games to go here in this season where if it continues to look the way it did in the previous 7 games, then I still think we're right back in that conversation of this team being one and done. The reason why I say all of that is I don't want to give the keys to the franchise to a GM and a coach if there is a likelihood that I could move on from them at the end of the season. It's why I put the players in the 2 buckets. Sure, you want to move on from Breece Hall because he's a free agent at the end of the year? I can let you do that because he was a free agent at the end of the year, and the next GM may not have the opportunity to sign him in free agency. The players that are going to have their contracts expire, I'm willing to let this GM make those moves. But the last thing I want to do is to trade a player like a Quinnen Williams or a Will McDonald and get to the end of the season and this team go 1-16 and they make a change and then a new GM comes in and would kind of like to have Q here and would like to have Will McDonald here. And so because I'm not sold on the idea of these guys coming back just yet for a second season, I have a really tough time endorsing, no matter what the compensation is, moving any of these guys that we think could be. Quinn Williams could be a key to anybody's defense. Will McDonald can be a key to anybody's defense. So that's where there's the why I put the players in the two buckets, because those players in that bucket of they're here beyond this year, I don't know if I want to let this GM and this coach really decide those guys' futures, because I don't know if Muji and Glenn's future is all that certain right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And just to put into financial perspective a little bit about Will McDonald, they have to make the decision about his 5th-year option. But right now it's around 14 to 15 million. I think it could go up to 16 million. That's right around like outside the top 20 for edge rushers in the NFL. So if you're getting Will McDonald for that type of a bargain and you have that contractual obligation over him for the next couple years, yeah, I definitely want to see maybe the situation or the decision comes at the end of next offseason when he doesn't have any more years left on his deal and he is entering that 5th year. I would like to see them stick it out with Will McDonald at least one more year, but the financials are not really hampering you.
And,
you mentioned
well, and the only other thing I would add is if they want to move any of these players that are under team control, if Muji and Glenn stick around and they want to evaluate that in the springtime, no problem. Go wild, make those trades then. There's no rush to move those guys right now, because I don't see a world where you're going to get worse value in the spring for those players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I think right now there's a lot of players on this list who aren't at the peak of their value, and we'll get into one right immediately after this. But yeah, I think if this is going to be the coaching staff moving forward, they have to be able to make those decisions in the offseason versus some guys like you mentioned that are coming up on the end of their deal that aren't going to get to make that decision in February or March when that offseason comes. So you talked about Quinn Williams. This is the easiest no for me. If I'm the Jets, I'm hanging up most offers that don't include a first-round pick. Again, you're trading him to a contender. You're not getting a top 25 pick back for Quinn Williams. You're getting pick 28 to 32. In most realistic scenarios, the team trading for him is somebody like the Chiefs or somebody who's going to make a long playoff push. Like I don't see him going to the Cowboys and all of a sudden the Jets have the 17th overall pick for Quinn Williams. I want a first-round pick and an ascending player like in the mold of John Mechie, probably a little bit more established, a dart throw at somebody who has a contractual obligation that they can see ascending on their offense or defense. So Quinnen to me is the easiest no. And that's, I want to keep their defensive line intact. You mentioned the coaching staff. We don't know if we trust them. Should we eliminate all of the talent that they have? I understand we went 1-7 with Quinn Williams, but I don't want to go 1-16 and have Aaron Glenn say, well, let's, get more talent in here. We were very talent deprived down the back half and we struggled, but that's why we need to see a second year of us. I want to give them as much talent as possible, deal the hands that you were dealt and make the best hand that you can make at the table and then reassess in the offseason. So what are your thoughts on Quinnen?
I'm a no, but there is a world where I would say yes. And I think that's in the springtime, because to your point right now, if you're trading him for, let's say, a second-round pick, or you can get it into the first round, you don't actually know where that pick's going to end up. You can have a range, you can have an idea, but you don't actually know. Whereas in the springtime, the Jets are going to be in the quarterback market. The Jets are going to be drafting a quarterback relatively high in this draft. We know that's going to be the case. And the best thing that the Jets can do for that young quarterback is to Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn to right the wrongs of each of the last couple of regimes where they did not support that player with the right personnel around him. They did not give him the infrastructure, the investment with draft capital of young playmakers around him, with investments on the free agent side. So if I get to the offseason and somebody's willing to offer me a pretty high up number 2 pick for Quinnen Williams, I may think to myself, I made 2 pretty shrewd trades if I'm Darren Muji to help my defensive line. I could probably make another one of those at some point. And Q's a really good player, but that second-round pick could be somebody that helps my young quarterback, because that's going to be the focus. That's where all of the attention is going to go, and it needs to go there. So I wouldn't do it. Q's a great player. I wouldn't do it for the second half of this season. But, man, in the springtime, if I see where I'm at on the board and I don't like my draft capital situation and I'm trying to load up to support a young quarterback, Q's one of the guys that I think you have to consider because he's going to bring you back the most, and he's going to bring you back those type of picks where you can get impact players to help your young quarterback.
Yeah, I think also as you were talking, the only way I'm entertaining the trade now or this week is if Quinnen comes to me, if I'm AG or Darren Muji, and
Fair.
says, "Hey, my timeline doesn't match your timeline," and then again, that's completely fair. He's entitled to that. If you want to say, "Hey, we want you to go succeed at the back end of your career," and it isn't going to match up with our timelines that maybe we are going to rebuild and we aren't looking at a run until 2027 or 2028, which obviously we hope isn't the case, but that's the only way I'm entertaining a trade today of Quinnen Williams. So
Here's what I would do. Here's what I would do if I was Muji and Glenn. I would get to the end of the season and I would sit down with Q and lay it out for him and say, listen, do you want to still be here? Do you want to play out the rest of your career with New York, or do you honestly want to go to try to win someplace else? Because if that's the case, we will accommodate you. But if you truly want to be here, if this is your home, if this is where you want to be, I will say this, Dylan. We talk about the culture changing around this franchise. We talk about people buying into what Aaron Glenn is doing. Having somebody like a Quinnen Williams is extremely valuable. So if you were going to move him, you would have to get value that's more than the value Q provides in that locker room. And that's going to be hard to replace. So I think to me, the first thing I would do if I was the guys in charge, I'm having a sit down heart to heart with Q and say, listen, what do you want? And if his answer to me is, I want to be here, man, it's going to be hard for me to trade that guy because that's somebody that's going to go to bat for me as a coach. And I need that guy in that room for me in year 2.
yeah, 100%. He is one of those few players. There's about 4, maybe 5 players on this roster that I think trickle the message down from the coaching staff to the other players on the roster. And I think Quinnen does a good job of that. And he also leads by example. I know he's not having the best season performance-wise from a pass rush standpoint, but he is certainly a leader by example and then a vocal leader in the locker room when he needs to be. So let's couple that one in. His older brother, a guy who is not under contract after this season, Quincy Williams, the linebacker, returning from his injury, time on injured reserve. He had a pretty good game on Sunday. He looked like the best linebacker out there, but that's more so because Jamien Sherwood looks like an unmitigated disaster out there. Quincy Williams, the likely compensation is a day 3 pick. I would assume it's something very similar to the Michael Carter compensation, where it's a day 3 pick swap, maybe in 2026, not 2 drafts removed like it was today. But you could also potentially have that upside dart throw of a different positional player coming back. So would you trade Quincy right now at the trade deadline?
Yeah, and he falls into that bucket of those players whose deals are expiring at the end of the year, in which I'm okay with this regime letting those players go. And it's not because I don't like Quincy as a player. I mean, you and I go way back on the Quincy train of being out on him as a player and then him having that glow up and him being the best player on the defense a couple of years ago, just being all over the place, making plays. So I've been on a roller coaster ride with Quincy, and I loved the player that we saw over the last couple of seasons. But to me, he's going to hit free agency. I don't think the Jets are going to be interested in bringing him back at the number he wants to be brought back at. So get a day 3 pick, and not because I think Darren Muji needs more draft capital in the draft, but you use those picks the way you did to get Phillips, the way you did to get Brownlee. Like that's you have shown early on, and I don't want to try to put too much stock into it, but you have shown early on as a GM, that's clearly a strength of yours. Like you are really adept at identifying these players that are going to be roster casualties elsewhere, but can be impact players for you, or at least rotational players for you, and fill a role, fill a need. And that's a way better use of your day 3 capital than some of the dart throws that we've seen this regime in their one draft already make. So to me, that type of capital, I don't know if I'm making all the picks if I get it, but I'm using those picks to do exactly what you did to get Brownlee in here, to get Phillips in here.
Yeah, you definitely use them to the best of your ability to create talent wherever it is, whether it is a Brownlee or a Phillips or a Briggs, or you use them to trade up to earlier rounds where you feel like you have a better hit rate. Maybe it's the end of the 3rd or early 4th, and you just trade a couple of your late day 3 picks. So I would say right now I'm holding on to Quincy only because the linebacker room is just completely decimated, and I don't think Jamien Sherwood can hold it all down by himself. He was already benched for disciplinary reasons in the first quarter of this game, so I don't love to see that. But I can't argue, to your point, anybody on an expiring deal that they don't have a plan for at least the next 2 years. If you can't give them at least a 2-year extension, then your timelines just aren't going to match up. And I understand he is a bit older. I think he's going to be 30 in the offseason. So that is a way to get out of that and not necessarily hamper yourself. You can't pay 2 off-ball linebackers. My hot take is they should try to find a way to trade Jamie and Sherwood and then pay Quincy Williams, but that becomes more of a headache in the financial situation if you were to try to do that. So Quincy, I would say I'm on the fence, but I could totally agree that if they moved him, it's not the end of the world. Another guy that we've probably all said it at one point as Jets fans, Alan Lazard can go for a 7th round pick in 3 seasons, and that's okay. I'm okay with it. He was on the list, but it is going to be a day 3 pick swap at very, very best. You're not getting much for him at all, but what's the point, right? I feel like there's not much that he's doing. He did have a good run blocking game this past weekend, but I don't see enough from Alan Lazard to warrant him staying. So if anybody calls me on Lazard, I am taking their offer.
Interesting, because I agree with you, but there's also part of me that goes, what's the harm in him being in the room with the state of the room right now? Like, yes, he's a net negative out there a lot of the time, right? I mean, the run blocking is not very good. He has drops that make you want to rip your hair out. Like, I get it. The player that Alan Lazard has been since he's got to New York hasn't been very good, but beggars can't be choosers right now in the wide receiver room for the New York Jets. And so it does feel weird to deal from a position of relative weakness for the team. Now, I get it. If somebody calls you, if Pittsburgh calls you and they want to do something with you, then I guess you do it. But I just, that room is so bad right now. I would just take anybody at this point.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's, if you could use Alan Lazard for all his off the field positives, that's great. But as soon as you put him on the field, like you said, he's a net negative. So I guess that balances out to a net neutral if he could be that veteran, kind of leader in the room. But it is there's no attachment, right? I guess that's really what I'm trying to say.
Fair
There's
enough.
no attachment to Alan Lazard, and I'll drive him to the airport myself if the deal is right. Now, this one, I saved this one for last because I think we are going to have the most disagreement here. He has come under many speculations of trade rumors in the past couple weeks. He just showed out in Cincinnati to the tune of 3 total touchdowns, 133 rushing yards. That is running back Breece Hall. What are your thoughts on the one-time second round pick of the New York Jets?
Yeah, Breece Hall and his 3 touchdowns helping me win a fantasy matchup in which I did not play a quarterback because I had him and Jonathan Taylor both on the same team in the same week. So that worked out pretty well for me. I'm going to have a little bit of a nuanced opinion here. I am a trade him, but not for the reasons that you may think. Not because I don't value what Breece Hall is. I'm saying trade him because the Jets have told me what they think of Breece Hall. The Jets as an organization right now are not utilizing Breece Hall as somebody that you should back up the Brinks truck for and pay towards the top end of the running back market, because guess what? That's what you're going to have to do here in the offseason to keep Breece Hall around. Now, if you told me that in one of these little boxes, you're going to pop up Tanner Engstrand and he's going to tell me, don't worry, Chris, we're going to get Breece Hall in on a big-time contract extension and his usage is going to change and he's going to be utilized more as a traditional RB1, then yes, don't trade him, keep him around. But the Jets have told us what they think of Breece Hall. He's not on the field in key third downs. Isaiah Davis has been getting those reps, and rightfully so. Isaiah Davis has been a very good pass blocker in those scenarios. Isaiah Davis has shown to be a competent running back, I would say average to slightly above average at times running back in this league. And so I think there's a appetite on the Jets' part to say, we've got Isaiah Davis. Braylon Allen's going to be coming back from an injury. We can always pick somebody up on day 2, day 3 of the draft to add to that room. Why do we need to spend top of the market value for a guy like Breece? And that's showing through the way that they are using him, right? They are telling you what they think of Breece Hall and the running back position by the way they're using him. So unless their approach to Breece's production is going to change, then I think they have to move him.
Yeah, entering the week 8 matchup, the third down usage was heavily favoring Isaiah Davis, much to the disagreement of me specifically and a lot of Jets fans. I mean, you have to use Breece Hall on third down, even if you split him out wide and keep Isaiah Davis in as your quote-unquote true running back in the backfield. You have to find a way to keep Breece Hall on third down. I don't care if you incomplete the pass on first down, then run it with him for 4 yards. He's not tired. You could keep him out there. And I think the usage from week 8 when they desperately had to use him was pretty telling, because it's like, okay, when they actually had to go use him, he made the most of it. So why couldn't they just, channel that, kind of energy earlier on in the season with him? He only has 3 games this year with 18 or more carries. After last year, he had 0 games of 20 plus carries. So the last 2 years, I feel like he's just been brutally underutilized. And to your point, yes, if they say, hey, we're not going to use him, this is, we're showing you how we're going to use him moving forward, so it doesn't justify paying him 12, 13 million a season like Kyron Williams just got in the offseason. Fair, totally understandable. To me, I look at it like rookie quarterback incoming. You're going to want to put somebody next to him who is very, very capable. And I think Breece Hall is capable. I think he's much more capable than Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis right now. Braylon coming off the injury, we're probably not going to see him for the rest of the season. I mean, he is a really good back. And I think at times he's probably shown he's better than Braylon Allen even. But I don't know where the other running back is to round out that room that makes me feel confident with that said rookie quarterback in the backfield. So give me Breece Hall, and you just take all that money you save from Michael Carter, and you can just put it right into a 1-year, franchise or transition tag with Breece, or you do a 2-year dummy deal for 2 years, 22 million with 18 million guaranteed in case he gets hurt in that second year. Give him some flexibility in that second year with the Jets. So I'm in favor of keeping Breece Hall. Plus, I just don't think you're getting more than a 4th round pick. Now, maybe if you're selling at the absolute high of his season right now, you maybe get a 3rd, but are you getting a comp 3rd that's like picks 96 to 104? I don't know if I love that for a Breece Hall specifically. So I want to keep the talent in house, and hopefully if they keep him, I think the expectation would be find a way to keep him on the roster with the new rookie incoming. Because if you're just going to ride out the rest of the season with Breece Hall and let him go, then I think that's a complete mismanagement of your resources, and you have to allocate or get some kind of recuperation of picks back for Breece.
Agreed. And I was just going to say to that if he does stay on this roster through the trade deadline, then my prediction is that he gets the franchise tag or the transition tag here in the offseason. I do not think they work out a long-term deal with him. I think you're going to see a regime that says, all right, this is only our 2nd year. Is this really the guy that we want to commit long-term dollars to? We can actually kick this can down the road. We can follow the Giants Saquon Barkley thing and just put the franchise tag on him. And I think that's what they do if he's ultimately on this roster past the trade deadline.
Absolutely. All right, now we're going to get into our back 9 expectations. So I mentioned it at the top. We're going to look at this as like a golf course, 18-hole golf course. The first 9 weeks, first 9 holes of the Jets scorecard, a lot of double bogeys, Chris. A lot of squares on that scorecard.
Double bogeys, I think, being a little generous. I think there's some triples on there.
We might have stroked out on a couple holes, if we're being completely honest. But it somewhat lightens up. We have some easier par 3s, some reachable par 4s coming down the stretch. What can you see from this team? And you can talk about the coaching, a player specific, a scheme approach. What is it that you need to see most from this regime over the next 9 games that makes you say, hey, this is a Jets team that I am proud of, Aaron Glenn?
Yeah, I'm going to focus on Aaron Glenn and the coaching side of this because I'm looking for an invitation. I'm looking for permission to look at this team with the glass half full, right? And right now, the win that they just picked up against Cincinnati is the start of that. Because let's flash back to a week ago before they beat Cincinnati. Yeah, they almost beat Pittsburgh in week 1. Yeah. Yeah, they had a lead late against Tampa, sure. Yeah, if they would have just made a quarterback change against Denver, they probably win that game. Yeah, if they got better quarterback play, they beat Carolina. You can convince yourself that the team is a lot better than their 0-7 record, but the results, the week-to-week progression doesn't give you that invitation. It doesn't give you permission to look at it that way. The win against Cincinnati starts to give you that permission. It starts to allow you to be like, okay, we almost beat Pittsburgh. Now we've got 2 wins. Almost beat Tampa. That's 3 wins. Almost beat Denver with the worst quarterback play I've seen in the last couple of years. You start to be able to look at it glass half full instead of glass half empty. Now, they cannot rest on the laurels of this game against Cincinnati. You got to go out and beat Cleveland coming out of the bye week. That team is a mess. Myles Garrett just put up a all-world performance. It's still not good enough. They lose by double digits. They continue to trot out Dylan Gabriel, even though he's clearly not the best quarterback in that franchise right now. You have to come out of that bye week and continue to build off of what you build in Cincinnati. You do that, now you've got 2 wins. Now I can say they almost had 3 wins against Pittsburgh. They almost had 4 wins against Tampa. A 5th win either against Carolina or Denver, and now it doesn't feel as bad. And I'm allowed to get there because I'm seeing the results. I'm seeing these games be played the way we know the Jets can play them. They may only end up with 3 or 4 wins by the time the season is done. That's okay, because if I see a second half that looks a lot better than the first half, and I get a couple of wins, right? Let's say they finish with 4 wins. It means they're going to pick up 3 here down the stretch. If they do that and they finish with 4 wins, and I see a much more improved team in the second half, if every game is close, if every game is one possession, if every game they're not digging themselves these early holes, then I can see a team that goes 4-13, and I can convince myself, man, they're this close to being 8-9. They're this close to being 7-10, and I actually feel it. Right now, it feels like a coping mechanism rather than an actual feeling. So that's what I want to see in the second half. You need to find 2 or 3 wins here in the second half. You need to play close games the rest of the way. And yeah, you may only end up with 3 or 4 wins by the time the season is over, but that's okay. That would be enough for me to say, bring this group back. They finished stronger than they started. And it allows me to look back and say, yeah, they almost figured it out in the Pittsburgh game, because I have a bunch of other stuff on the resume that I can point to where the results actually went their direction.
Yeah, without staying like hard and fast to a number of wins that I want to see down the stretch. If they went 3-6 and in 4 of those 6 losses down the back 9, they lost at the last minute and they were competitive, and ESPN gave them more than a 20% chance to win at halftime, like some of these very uncompetitive games against, I know Tampa Bay was close at the end, Miami was uncompetitive, Dallas was uncompetitive. If you show me competitive football over those 9 games, I can deal with only 3 wins. I would like to see, 4-5, 5-4. Of course, I would love to see as many wins as possible. But to your point, you have to show tangible evidence that there is improvement and start building a cachet for us fans or an analysts or content creators to say, hey, we can hang our hat on this and we can build this moving forward, whether it's the offensive scheme and Tanner Engstrand doing a good job surviving with his quarterback play and having everything else function around him, where you can start to identify and picture and visualize a Fernando Mendoza, a Dante Moore, a Ty Simpson standing back there in that pocket, doing the things that Justin Fields is doing, or even doing better than Justin Fields is doing. If we can't see those things as a fan base, it's going to be very hard to feel confident that these guys are the ones to pick the next quarterback. If it looks like the Denver game where you're scoring 3 field goals and a safety, or the Carolina game where you have 2 different quarterbacks and only muster up 2 field goals in the entire game, that's really disappointing. So my focus is so much more on the offensive side of this, because I need to know, is Tanner Engstrand the guy who's going to be closer to Mike LaFleur than he is Nate Hackett? And I feel like this game against Cincinnati was more evidence and building more of a cachet where their back isn't so up against the wall anymore, but we need to keep building on that momentum. You can't just fall flat against a very formidable Cleveland defense, but a offense that you certainly can take advantage of from a defensive perspective. Start rattling off those turnovers that we desperately need as a defense, getting those interceptions. So yeah, it's all about building momentum at this point. You mentioned the glass half full. It feels like there's finally water in the glass.
Yeah.
Like not even an empty or full type of metaphor. It's like there's finally water in the glass for us to look at and say, wow, there is evidence that these guys could prove to be back. Because up until then, I was, accepting of the fact that they're probably back even after a 1-16 season, but I was no longer trying to provide evidence that they should be. Now I feel like I have some evidence from that Bengals game, but let's continue building on it against an inferior Cleveland team.
This is an oversimplification of it. Give me a reason to give you the benefit of the doubt. That's what these final 9 games are for this team. Give me a reason to give you the benefit of the doubt. And if you rattle off a couple of wins here, now I can retroactively go back and say, this coaching staff now wins the Pittsburgh game. This coaching staff now wins the Tampa game. This coaching staff now makes the correct move against Denver and wins that game. They do the right things against Carolina and win that game. Make me convince me that you deserve the benefit of the doubt. They started that trend against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now it's about continuing it. And listen, there are winnable games. They have a game against the Dolphins. They have a game directly out of the bye against Cleveland. Those are two games that I'm immediately circling as wins that they could have. That gets you to 3. It's the NFL. You can win any given Sunday. You pick off another one, that's 4. And then there's some positive momentum. And by the way, if they're winning those games, it means the coaching staff is doing the little things like Aaron Glenn identifying we're down 14. We're going to go for 2 in this spot to set us up to be able to win the game late, right? Put yourself in opportunities to show us you know what you're doing. That was an example where he did that. So it's an oversimplification because there's so much that goes into it. But give me a reason in these final, 10 games or so, 9 games that they have left on their schedule. Give me a reason to give you the benefit of the doubt, because at 0-7, you were giving me reasons to show you the door.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. Chris, I greatly appreciate you hopping on. You are one of my favorite people to talk ball with, so I'm so glad that you had some free time and you were able to give me some of your time on the channel, and I certainly appreciate you.
Well, Dylan, always good to talk ball. It had been way too long, but glad to see you having all the success that you're having. I'm always paying attention to what you're doing here on the YouTube side of things and over with the Believe in Jet stuff now. So always excited to talk ball and super happy for the success that you're having.
I appreciate it. For Chris Schubert, I am Dylan DTereman signing off the Believe in Jets podcast. I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.